Hi and welcome to the Move Better, Feel Better show here on Radio Kidnappers. My name is Sarah McCallum from Movement Works, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the movements and the issues and the things that people come and see me about. So when we hear the word movement, we're like, what does moving better actually mean? So a lot of people that come to me for some help, a lot of them are experiencing some kind of pain, and so that might just be a pain doing a particular movement. Maybe it hurts them, say, like to bend over and pick up the grandkids or something off the floor. Maybe they've got some difficulty getting in and out of a chair, walking up and down stairs. Maybe when they're running a little bit, they get some kind of difficulty or pain in their hip. And it might be sometimes actually that there's no particular pain or difficulty or movement that they can specify. They're like, I just kind of hurt. I'm a bit tired. I'm a bit achy. At the end of the day, I feel really old. My back hurts. I've been sitting for a long period of time, or I've been standing for a long period of time. Just somehow just being is some kind of pain. So that is a lot of what I deal with, because, we all know that pain just sucks. And that living with pain, of any kind of pain, or moving in a way that causes you pain, makes your life like a little bit less easy. We don't like to live like that. It makes you tired. It makes you grumpy. It sucks that energy just living with that kind of difficulty. So that's a large part of the clients that I deal with. I also deal with people come to see me with situations like they might have had, say, a hip replacement, and there's nothing structurally wrong, that everything's where it should be, but they've still got some kind of pain. They're just like, well, it's just not quite the same how it was. And often that is because basically they still move and walk the same way they did before the operation as well as after the operation. So we can talk a little bit about what's going on with that. And often people come, they're like, I've tried a lot of different things, nothing really works, but I'm still not moving in the way that I want. I also deal with people who have postural problems, who they're like, I just feel like quite stooped. I can't feel like I stand up straight. Or at the end of the day, it's like, you get a little bit shorter by the end of the day compared to the start of the day. Or, for example, they're like, my back hurts, when I try and stand up straight or when I sit up straight. I deal with people who've got breathing difficulties, or like maybe dealing with anxiety, or they just want to sort of generally feel like a little bit more mobile. They want to keep that mobility. A lot of it is about this sense of getting older. It doesn't always have to be age-related, but that often seems to be what's happening, or they've had a very physical job. I deal with people who, with builders, with farmers, electricians, different kinds of tradies who have had really physical jobs all their lives, and they've smashed themselves, and at a certain point there's like, the body actually says, hey, you know what, you've been doing this all this time, and actually now I'm starting to get a little bit, a few little pains here, a few little aches here, and maybe getting up and down that ladder isn't as easy, or in fact, maybe the knees just won't let you do that anymore. So that's mainly what people come to see me for, and that's for the one-on-one, hands-on, one-on-one situation. So I'm going to take you through a little bit more about, I'm going to give you an example of one of the clients that I'm working with at the moment. And I should just also like to say, in terms of people I deal with, the other thing is, of course, I also deal with people who've got, spinal injuries, concussions, maybe some other neurological situations or balance issues. So that's all involved in it. It's this generic movement of any kind, how we live and how we function in our daily lives, this natural, easy, normal movement that, we're born to have, that somehow, some way, is just not working out quite as well as you want it to. So I'm going to talk you through somebody who came to see me recently. Let's call her Sophie. And she came with low back pain. And she sort of said she'd been referred from a friend, and her friend had sort of said, go see Sarah, she's going to help you, like I'm feeling so much better, and don't have pain anymore, and I can do all these things. And friend says, well, hey, I want a bit of that too. I've got this back pain, and it's been niggling, and I've been going to see the chiropractor on and off for years and years, and I still live with this back pain. It's just part of me. I don't really think that anything can be done, but oh well, what can it harm? So she rings me up. We have a quick chat about what's going on with her, and then she comes to see me. And I always start off with those one-on-one clients with a first consultation, which is 1 hour. And basically we talk a little bit about, what's happening. So for Sophie, I was like, okay, you said you've got low back pain. So, when do you experience your low back pain? Do you experience it, does it wake you up at night? Yes, she says, it definitely wakes me up at night. Not a lot, but, enough that she rolls onto her back, she finds it uncomfortable and she has to, kind of wake herself up, roll over to one side, go back to sleep. Okay, what about sitting? She goes, oh, yeah, sitting sometimes, I sort of feel like I can't sit upright for a long time. I feel like I need to have, my chair back there. And I'm like, okay, so what about when you're, getting up from your chair? Is that something where you find difficulty? And she's like, oh yeah, definitely. Get up, and I'm just like, oh, it just catches in my lower back when I do that sit to stand. And I'm like, okay. So we just talk a little bit about that, and of course we go over, for Sophie, we talk about what she does for a living. She's in her 60s, early 60s, she's still working, she's still got a relatively physical job, so she's on her feet a lot. She loves to garden, but she's finding, she can't garden for too long because, she gets a sore back. And we also talk a little bit about, what kind of other activities she does, and it's not about judging or rating, how much you do, it's just to kind of get a sense of how you spend your time, what's going on in your life, what kind of variety of movements do you do in your day, are you doing a lot of repetitive movements and things like that. And so she said, yeah, well, I like to garden, but I don't garden as much as I'd like to. I walk the dog, and she said, that's probably about it. She said, yeah, there's not a lot of other stuff that I do. She doesn't do any other classes and things, and she spends a bit of time with her family, of course, and she's quite into her crafting, so she likes to sit and do a bit of paper craft and different things like that. And anyway, so okay, this is just a good idea. We talk a little bit about any previous injuries. She's been pretty lucky. She's only had a few injuries. She's broken her left ankle, and I think it was her right wrist. So, she's actually not had too many breaks and too many other kind of, accidents or operations or things like that. And again, we're all really different. We've all had these different life experiences, not necessarily about, how many operations or injuries we've had. I mean, definitely that counts towards our movement situation, but it also depends on what kind of job you have. It's a different experience if you sit in an office all day, compared to if you're a builder, for example. You use yourself in a different way. If you're a sports person and, you spend many hours a week, running or playing tennis or playing rugby or, whatever it is that you do in your spare time, that can also have an influence not only on the amount of times you may have injured yourself, bumped or bruised or whatever, but, it just changes how your movement habits and everything that puts together. Okay, so we talk about what's happening with Sophie there, so we've got a little bit of an idea. And then we're like, okay, she says, we've talked a little about what is it that you actually can help with. And so the work that I do is based on what we call the Feldenkrais method. And Feldenkrais rhymes with nice. And basically it's a system of learning. So this is like what we call somatic education. So it's not actually just about learning a new particular movement, like a dance move or say something that you do in a gym class. This is actually about connecting the body and the brain. And we're actually kind of finding out, what your movement patterns are. Because every time you do anything, like there's little firing things going off in the brain, little networks in the brain. And some of those networks and pathways are helpful, some of them are less helpful. And what we want to do is find the more helpful ones. And so we want to unlearn maybe some movement habits or some things that we do that might be causing that situation, patterns of tension, and replace them or learn different ways so you can, move a little bit better. And she's like, okay, brain stuff, okay, yeah. And I said, so it'll become clear as we work together. And for example, I'll just show you, but one of the things that we do, for most of the time we don't think about what we do unless it hurts, Yeah, we're so busy doing what we do. You know, we sit at our desks, we go for a run. You know, we're concentrating on where we're running, maybe how fast we're running or what we're doing. We're not actually kind of thinking, oh, you know, how's my pelvis moving when I run? You know, what's the positioning of my arms? Are my shoulders up near my ears? You know, is my head forward? We don't pay that much attention to ourselves unless somebody's actually coaching us along, or you know, we have some kind of difficulty. So most of the time we're on this automatic pilot. You know, we just do what we do. And that's what we're talking about in this brain stuff. So that's happening in what we call the fast brain, in the back of the brain, yeah, where we're pretty much just living our lives, doing what we do. What I do in my work is that we actually start to add a little bit of awareness. So we're actually kind of moving things to the front part of your brain for a moment, kind of actually saying, oh, what is it that I do? Yeah, I don't know. I've never really thought about it before. Yeah, I mean, who has, right? We don't have time to think about that. And it's a really interesting thing. So once we start to put that into that thinking part of the brain, yeah, we can start to analyze what's happening, what's not happening, what the connections are. And then basically when we put it back into the fast brain, yeah, when we're out doing what we're doing, yeah, we've got some new options. We've got some new awareness. So for example, okay, how does that work? Yeah, if you just interlace your fingers, you got your fingers interlaced, yeah? And you would have done that without really thinking about it. Just put your fingers together like this. Okay, now if I ask you to interlace your hands in what we call the non-habitual way, you're like, well, what the heck does that mean? Okay, so that means that you're going to actually swap the thumb that's on the top. You're going to bring your fingers together, you're going to slide them all along one, and bring it down, and your brain will be telling you, it'll be like, oh, that feels really weird, you know, and you feel kind of slightly uncomfortable, but you've had to think about that. You don't, once you do them a few times, it's pretty easy to do that, but most of the time, first time somebody does that, they're like, and you know, some people even come in and they turn their fingers over and they've got like two fingers together and they can't figure it out, because again, we've gone from that automatic to actually kind of going, oh, I have to think about this. Okay, there it is. And that slight strange sense, or you know, you can feel your brain kind of going, oh, I really would prefer to have it that way. That's your habit, yeah. That's the non-habit, yeah. But both are options. So these are the kind of things that we actually start to go, okay, you know, this is your habit. This is what you do. Did you know that's what you do? Do you know what thumb that you normally have on top when you've got your hands interlaced? So, you know, for example, go back to Sophie when she's talking about like her back. Okay, so just sitting here in a chair. I said, let's just see what it's like to sit away from the back of your chair. So, you know, we shuffle forward to the front of your chair, and you can just sit, and she, you know, immediately she goes, I'm going to sit up straight. And you can see the tension in her back. Yeah, that she's got this arch in her back. And this is what she does all of the time. Yeah, her back is habitually tight. But she doesn't know that. She just knows that it hurts. Okay, so my first step is to say, okay, can you get some kind of sense? You know, where can you feel that holding? And when I first ask that for most people, like Sophie's like, I can't feel anything. I don't know. And that's a perfectly okay answer, not knowing, not being sure, because we're not, again, taught to pay attention to ourselves. So she's like, she goes, you know, it kind of, if I stayed here for a long time, I know that would hurt. And I'm like, okay, that's good to know. All right. So then we take her over to, I've got like a low table. So for a one-on-one session, this is a hands-on session. Everything's fully clothed. I've got a low table. It's a bit wider than a massage table. So we go and sit down on that. And then I'm like, okay, what would it be like then to maybe just slouch a little bit? And she kind of looks at me funny and kind of goes, I'm here to, like, you know, get my back sorted. You know, I don't want to learn to slouch. And, you know, I teach a lot of my clients to slouch well. And they think, you know, but don't you deal with posture? You know, that's not kind of like what I'm here for. But again, it's very important for your back to be able to move, okay? So I'm not advocating that you slouch all of the time, absolutely not. But we need to be able to bend, we need to be able to move in and out of these different positions, yeah, so that the spine has this flexibility. Because when there's some tightness there, like, you know, her basically doesn't matter what movement she's doing, her back doesn't really change shape. It's kind of in this sort of tight pulled position all of the time. And when there's that tightness there, that means her shoulders, she hasn't told me yet, but I know she has some difficulty in her shoulders and pain in her shoulders because her lower back is so tight that, these shoulders are having to overwork to compensate for that tightness there. Yeah, there's some difficulty and tightness in her hips because, again, same thing, when she's not moving in one part, everything else has to compensate. So this is the other thing, is that when you have a pain or difficulty or something in one place, it starts to actually flow on. It's not usually just one place. So here we are. So we're just doing a little kind of slouchy movement, and I'm like, okay. So now we start to investigate what different parts of her back she's using and what she's not using, and we start to invite different parts of her back. So as I said, that low back there wasn't moving at all. Come into there. And the other thing that we do in these sessions is we're doing this super slow. Sophie's somebody who likes to go fast. She's impatient. She's got a lot to do in her life. She's like, God, I'm going to slouch. And I'm like, okay, if you slouch really quickly, one, you might hit yourself into some kind of pain or difficulty. Two, how can you notice what you're doing if you're going super fast? And again, we're trying to get into this thinking brain, and when you're learning something, especially for the first time, you need to go a little bit slower. Slow gets the brain's attention. If you're just going fast, it's like driving at 100 kilometres an hour. You don't get to enjoy the view so much. You can see out the window, but you kind of get to your destination, you're like, oh, that's great. So we just slow things down. We go slow. And again, going slow sounds really easy, but when you're moving slow, it's like, she's like, oh, and then she's like, oh, when I come back from my slouching, I come past my middle point, and she starts to feel that actually she arches in her back when she comes up to upright. That habit of hers coming into upright. And you're like, just even starting to realise that. So that's not what I see or anything else like that. It's very important in my work that actually I empower my clients to actually notice for themselves, so that when they're out there living their lives, that they can actually, start to know. They're like, oh, am I here? Am I here? Oh, if I'm right up here and I'm arching my back, maybe I can just bring that down a tiny little bit. So we do that, and then I get her to lie down on the table, and we do a few different movements. I use my hands to help guide the movement. So it's not a, people sort of say, so is it like a chiropractor? I'm like, no, there's no sudden movements, there's no sharp cracks, there's absolutely no pain. Not to say that happens in chiropractors anyway, but it's a very different kind of movement. There's no, it's more, we're getting the sense of the skeleton, the bones, the fascia, how everything works together. But as I said, the big thing that we're actually accessing is actually the brain. Okay, so we're actually figuring out, what's this information? How's it processed in the brain? How's that, we send that sensory information back into the brain, and then that output from the brain comes back. You're like, oh, okay, that's what I can do. So that's a big difference. It's not massage. I'm not like kind of just rubbing and sort of pulling the muscles or doing things like that. We're actually using, and again, don't get me wrong, massage is great, but so it's more like massaging from the inside out, so that the muscles themselves, the brain's actually telling the muscles themselves, hey, you don't need to hold that tension. So rather than rubbing that tension out, like with a massage, say, we're actually getting the brain to say, hey, it's okay, you can release that. You don't need to hold on to that, because that's useless. We don't need that. And most of the time, as I said before, we don't even know that we're holding that tension. So we're doing a whole bunch of different movements, just really small, light movements, only staying within the comfortable range, because again, if the brain sort of senses, oh, that hurts, well, what's the brain going to learn out of that? The brain's going to learn that basically these particular movements, that they hurt, that they are big movements, and that they're going to cause pain, okay? And we're wanting to sort of override or create new pathways, new patterns that they don't have to hurt. So we're doing a bunch of different movements, and then after probably, in terms of, say it's an hour session, probably a time on the tables around about 30, 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, depending on how we go. Then we bring Sophie back up to sitting, and she's like, oh, I can't believe, didn't really feel like you were doing anything, but I feel, I can feel my back is different. And she goes, I'm not quite sure how. She goes, but it's different. Yeah. And so then we go back to the slouching movement, and then she can find the sense more of this neutral, that there's not so much tension when she's sitting there. And just like, and so this is what I say to her for her home play, is to be able to go home. And I said, just play with this little slouching movement, yeah, and notice when it is that you tighten your back, you can feel that tightness. And I said, this is your habit. Your tightness in your back has been with you for quite some time. It's unfortunately, generally, not going to go away overnight, okay? But again, that first step is that awareness, is to notice when that's happening. So I said, if you just go home, you play with this little movement of just, slouching a little bit, coming back, yeah, it'll start to help. Yeah, and I sort of say from here, what I recommend, and for most of my clients, what I'd recommend is usually a series of around about 10 sessions. It depends on what situation you've got going on, what's happening. Maybe you need less, maybe you need more. Yeah, but usually we start with 10 because, again, what we're wanting is to make some long-term changes. Yeah, so not that you have to come back for every week for the rest of your life. Yeah, because you're not it's not Groundhog Day. Yeah, we're actually going on this thing of improvement so that you can actually begin to find that for yourself, yeah? And say you'll feel more relaxed after your first session, you'll feel better, but it's like, okay, how can you do that for yourself? And you've got one little tip, one little thing. And then each week we have, one little thing that we work on, one little thing that we do. And those little improvements, those little changes start to become big changes. And it's always interesting because, with my clients, as they say, oh, yeah, have I noticed something this week? Oh. And then, maybe halfway through the session, they'll be like, oh, actually, you know what? I've been sleeping through the night without pain. That's a big thing, actually, but it's a small thing, so there's little things. Or, can you be 1% more comfortable? Could you sit for a few more minutes more comfortably in your chair? If one of your daily activities a little bit easier. And the interesting thing is it's really hard to notice the absence of pain. We're not, again, trained to look for the good, but it's like, and they're like, oh yeah, hey, how about that? Actually, my back hasn't hurt that much, I haven't needed to go to the chiropractor as much or whatever it is. But it's kind of like, we're so busy living our lives that we don't pay that attention. So again, that's a big part of that, is to help all of my clients and Sophie to understand, a little bit more about themselves, to become the expert in themselves so that they know what to do. And if they feel themselves, going back into that pattern of tension, because, hey, life happens, that then they go, oh, I know what I can do. Yeah, I know how I can change that for myself. And so it's like having your own little teacher within you. So that's just a little bit about, how I work with my one-on-one clients, and that's just one example of many. And as I say, it's really super interesting, and I love helping people to, get that power back, that they can actually help themselves, that their life, even though, they might be getting older, actually, my big thing is actually getting older can actually mean getting better. It doesn't have to be this downward slide, and you don't have to, deal with the pain and the aches and sort of that feeling of, being old. Decrepitude is not what you need to expect, okay? So if you are feeling any of those things, or maybe there's just something, or maybe somebody is having some kind of difficulty, and it works within, because we're working with functional movement, it works if you are already with your chiropractor or physio or specialist. Anything that I do actually enhances and works with that. It's not necessarily a replacement, it's an and as well. So we can talk through that as well. People choose different things. So you have been listening to Sarah McCallum from Movement Works on the Move Better, Feel Better show here on Radio Kidnappers. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what I do, you can check out my Facebook page at Movement Works NZ, or you can check out the website movementworks.co.nz. And say, always happy to just have a chat about what's going on with you and how I might be able to help. Or to be able to point you in the right direction of where you need to go. So wishing you good movement and good health. Till next time.